mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, and today I'm here to talk about Season 1, Episode 8, the Season 1 finale of Apple TV's Sugar, entitled Farewell. Farewell is a fitting title, as this could be the end of this season, or it could be the end of the show as a whole. Apple's never really billed it as a limited series, so my thought is that the desire is for it to continue, or at least the expectation was going in. But I feel like no one's really watching this show, so I don't know, maybe they'll just let it die. I hope not. Whatever decision they make, the finale works because it's a satisfying end to this season's story, but it also leaves the door open for more storytelling should they choose to renew the show. I was worried coming into this episode, as I've publicly stated many times, including in my video for episode 7, because I've enjoyed this show so much, and as I've said before, it took an idea that on paper sounds silly and made a serious noir detective drama with a real mystery that was always at the forefront of the show and was the main focus. And that's what the finale needed to do. It needed to show us that at its heart, this was a detective show and not a show about aliens. And I was worried. I was worried it would end up being this thing where, like, the American military was going to try to kill these aliens and they're trying to get on a spaceship and escape the Earth. And I now want to apologize for the doubt that I had in this show and its creators and everyone involved. That's never been what this show was, and the people behind it deserved a lot more faith from me heading into the finale. And I said my piece last week regarding how I felt about the reactions to the alien reveal, so I won't belabor the point here, but the people who bailed on this show because they were too cowardly to stray from what they felt was the proper response, those people really missed out. This show never, and I want to emphasize this for anyone who may think otherwise, this show never undermined the detective story with the alien shit. The alien stuff never became the focus, and they only included just enough of it to keep it as like an added layer of intrigue. Like, oh, that's an extra interesting thing. It never took away from the detective stuff, and that's what people wanted to pretend like it did so that they could hold their snooty opinions and they could act like that because they think that that's what lesser shows tend to do, and they didn't want to give this show the opportunity to be greater than that, and it was greater than that, and I hope they regret not watching it and holding their snooty fucking baseless fucking opinion. I said I wasn't gonna belabor the point, but I guess I decided to do that instead. Hey everybody, I just want to take a small break from this review to talk about the various other ways you can engage with me on other platforms. If you're so inclined, and I understand why you wouldn't, I am an acquired taste, but you can join the Patreon where you can get extra content like retro reviews, where I review old shows and movies to see if they still hold up today, Mike's Musings, where I talk about shows I'm watching that I don't cover on the channel, or Mike's VOD, where you can commission me to watch a show, which I will then review on the channel. And if you want to engage with me and chat with me more directly, I also implore you to join the Discord and follow the Facebook page. I set up channels in the Discord for all of us to discuss the shows I'm reviewing on the channel, and I also drop new videos in there since it's the easiest platform for me to share to from my phone. The Facebook can be really fun because I sort of live comment on shows I'm watching, often while under the influence, I'm not going to lie. And I'll also share news there, both about television and film, and about myself as well. So if you like my content, you want to be more engaged, you think I'm charming, or you simply want to show support, feel free to sign up for the Patreon or join the Discord or Facebook today. Links to all platforms are in every video description. Remember to share all my shit to your respective social media platforms. And now back to this review. So last week, I expressed concern about whether or not the show would satisfyingly wrap up all the remaining mysteries, but most importantly, make the connections that I needed. I needed to see how the Olivia plot with her getting kidnapped connected to the alien stuff. I felt like the show was telling us this whole time that there was a connection, but we never really got a hint of what the connection might be. I also wanted some resolution on the varying reactions to Olivia's kidnapping from the Siegel family, as well as something on John's sister, Jen, who's been talked about since episode 1 or 2, but we don't know anything about her other than the fact that she's missing or dead or whatever, and this is important to John. How is she connected to all this as well? Well, I got all those answers, and even some I wasn't even thinking about, but admittedly should have been. And I'll start there by talking about the thing that I should have been giving a little bit more thought, but then also the show didn't give us too much of it anyway. But it's what we learned about Jonathan Siegel and his relationship with Olivia. So after returning Olivia to Melanie, John visits Jonathan and shares the pictures that we've already seen, the Polaroids of Rachel, Bernie's wife, in the dress that, ex-wife I should say, in the dress that Jonathan's wife wore in the movie that we saw Sugar watching in whatever previous episode that was. That was another connection I needed. What was the significance of that dress to this story? Like, I just wasn't putting it together. And John was clearly lingering on it, as well as lingering on the room in which the photo was taken. When he walked past it and he saw that Shay's there, and he made note. They showed us the picture to let us know that it was the same one. So John accuses Jonathan of taking the photos himself. And Jonathan remarks on the similarities. In response to this, he remarks on the similarities between Rachel and his wife. And it's implied by John that Jonathan had an affair with Rachel, Bernie's wife, and that Olivia is actually his daughter and not his granddaughter and not Bernie's daughter. I worded that so fucked up. Olivia is actually his daughter and not Bernie's daughter. There we go. I don't even need the not his granddaughter part. That was I really fucked that up. This is and was the least interesting subplot for me, but I'm glad that it was addressed and wrapped up. The show constantly asked the question of why Jonathan seemed to care more about Olivia than everyone else did, and I guess that kind of answers that question. I was just never really into that subplot. I didn't give it a ton of thought. I thought it was handled a little bit. It wasn't given enough attention to let me know how much it was supposed to matter. It ended up mattering way more than I thought, and I'm just sitting here like, what the fuck is the point of this dress? So, not so great on that subplot. One thing I am wondering about, though, that was, I think, intentionally left open for a potential second season is the relationship between Bernie and Melanie. I'd like to see that explored more if we get a second season. Another thing I liked about this episode was the scene where John arrives back at Ruby's house pretty early on. He walks up, she's like, what are you doing here? He's like, okay, good morning, bitch. Like, what the fuck? John would never say that. She reveals they're now being hunted by the government and tries to lay a guilt trip on John for this. And remember, and I'm going to keep saying this, they're supposed to just be observing, right? If John had never gone to Pavich's house, they could calmly be preparing to leave as they would have been otherwise without being hunted. Instead, John goes there. Pavich is now dead, which we know he killed himself. John didn't do it. But now it looks like the aliens have reneged on their agreement to protect the humans doing their dirty shit. And then now that looks like they're no longer just observing, and that's why they're now being hunted. And she's like, so yeah, now we got to hurry up and go because you didn't listen. And John's just like, yeah, well, like I did the right thing, so I don't really give a fuck what you talking about right now. And I just thought his completely nonplussed reaction to her trying to guilt him was pretty funny. And then this also explains why Miller got shot at the beginning of the episode, which didn't make sense to me until much later. I was like, I went back, I was like, wait, what happened? Why was he shot? But I was like, okay, that was the clue that they were being hunted. Like, they got him first, and they were probably going to be coming for others. All right, so now, let's talk about the main connection that I needed here. I needed the kidnapping plot to somehow connect to the alien reveal. I didn't want to feel like the alien reveal was just some weird shit they did for the sake of doing it. But thankfully, the show didn't let me down. They connected the dots. Though in retrospect, it is a pretty complicated and clunky trail of events. So let me just kind of break it down from the beginning. And I'm going to speed right through it. But I'm going to break it down from the beginning and get us to the end. So, if I did have one complaint about the show, I would say that path to connecting Olivia's kidnapping to the aliens, it's a pretty convoluted one. And it wasn't explained in the most intuitive way, but that's what I'm here for. So let's start by reminding ourselves that we learned last week that the government knows about the aliens, and the aliens are essentially being blackmailed with the threat of exposure in exchange for protecting their secrets, including the kind of shit that Pavich was doing. But remember, the aliens are only supposed to be observing. So let's circle back to the beginning. And when I say the beginning, I mean the beginning of this story. Davey mentioned, the beginning of what we started to learn about Olivia. So Davey mentioned Olivia to Stallings. You remember the whole thing about his sexual assaults and all that kind of shit? Olivia's causing me problems. Man, he mentions this to Stallings. Stallings is a piece of shit. He kidnaps Olivia. Ryan Pavich, the senator's son, who we met last week, he's also a client of Stallings. That's the connection right there, Pavich and Stallings. And we learned that they were connected in the conversation that Henry and John had last week, the one where Henry told John everything, like, oh, we've been discovered, and they're blackmailing us, blah, 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 blah. That's the situation where we learned that the senator's son, Ryan Pavich, is also connected to Stallings. So Pavich is torturing women and recording video, including Olivia, while listening to the CD that John stole. Well, while John listens to the CD that he stole from Pavich's house, he gets the feeling there's another person in the room when Pavich says, "Don't you agree?" out loud in the room. And I like how they played this because they made it seem like he was talking to the woman in the room. But this prompts John to go back to the Siegel's house to ask Olivia if she felt like there was someone else in the room, another person. She says yes, even though the person never spoke. And John's like, well, if they never spoke, how the fuck you know somebody was in there? And she's like, they just kept writing. And that was the big reveal, I think, for that moment, because we were all supposed to. This ties back to earlier in the episode where John goes to see Henry at Ruby's house, and he's like out in like this backyard patio garden writing in his journal. So it calls back to that. And then this also couples with Pavich expressing a thought out loud on the video, on the CD that Henry had expressed to John in a private conversation earlier in the season. So he's like, oh, he's using the same terminology and saying the same sorts of things that Henry says. And now I know that there was someone in the room that was writing. So that's how we pieced together that Henry was in the room. So like they've said all season, again, their job is to objectively observe. So we come to the understanding that Henry, while also helping to protect the secrets of what they're doing because of the blackmail, is also getting a lot more involved with his observations. And everyone knew about Pavich and that Henry was involved. They just kept it from John because why the fuck would John take that well? Further, and this is the only part that kind of threw me, Henry also abducted John's sister, Jen. The show seems to imply maybe even a direct malicious intent from Henry as it pertains to like what he's doing with his observations, but that doesn't really track with what we've learned about Henry and the aliens and his relationship with John. I feel like Henry and John really are truly friends, so I hope it's more so that Henry knows who took Jen and has maybe even been observing that person. Maybe even he helped, but I don't want to think that he helped, but at the very least, he knows who did it, and he's been observing. He's just kept it from John in the same way that he observed Pavich, and he left Jen's dress there, or whatever you want to call that, her alien garb, as just as a clue for John to know that she's alive and maybe to begin a pursuit. In the same way that he assisted John with finding Olivia, it's kind of like I want to help make things right. I guess is what I think of what he's doing. We also see him on this phone call where he's having with John, where he's explaining all this stuff. He seems to be somewhere like he's about to do something important. That's another thing I like to pick up on season 2 as well. It seems like Henry's up to a lot more, and that's an actor that you don't just bring in for like a small role. Like, you use him, okay? I want him to be one of those bad guys who means well and thinks he's doing what's best rather than just an asshole who kidnaps his friend's sister because he's just way too into fucking with torturers and serial killers. But having said that, I'm satisfied with the connection. I'm glad we got it, although I do think it could have been presented in a more easily digestible way. But lastly, like I mentioned earlier, they did leave some stuff open for the second season. The most obvious thing is a pursuit of Henry in a quest to find Jen. That's obviously would be a plot for season 2. But they left some other stuff open too. Jonathan offered John a job as the head of security for his company that John turned down because he thought he was leaving, but now that he plans on staying and going after Henry, I would think that maybe accepting that job would be to his benefit. And then, of course, he could use his role in that job to assist in finding Henry, but being the head of security for the Seagulls could open up a B through E plot. Like, he could have a whole new person he got to look for, or some other situation he has to solve just in his job as head of security. So like that really opens up potential for season 2 as well. I think that's really all you need. The pursuit of Henry, and then give a couple of things related to his job as his head of security job, and you've got plenty right there. They could have Bernie find out that Olivia is Jonathan's daughter. That could be fun. I'd still like to learn more about Melanie and Bernie's relationship, and Melanie also presumably knows that John is an alien now. There's that great scene, they hold hands, the eyes change, which I'm sure he only did that because he thought he was leaving. So now you got that to play around with next scene as well. Like, hey, I'm here. And she's like, hey, what was that? What was that thing that happened with your eyes a minute ago? And I just somehow now know that you alien. What was up with that? And if they want to make Olivia series regular, they could carve out a fresh storyline for her as well. So all in all, I absolutely love this show. The detective story was compelling. I love the noir vibes and the integration of classic film. Colin Farrell was great in the lead role. I thought the John Sugar character is a great character. And they pulled off a twist that never should have worked. Tied up all the major loose ends in the finale and set up a second season. I don't see much to be dissatisfied with here. And I don't see this show falling out of my top 10 for 2024. So until next time, peace.